Hey everybody, hope you're having a good day. We are on to Chapter 2, so we get to talk about equations. Chapter 2 is all about equations, so you kind of get tired of these probably, but this is where we start. So the basics begin today. Solving equations by adding or subtracting. So hopefully by the end of the day you will be able to do just that. Solve equations by adding or subtracting. We're going to start with just one-step equations. And as we move through Chapter 2, we'll get through two-step, multi-step, and all that good stuff. So you have two vocab words today. First one is equation. So far we've been talking mostly about expressions. We haven't had a lot of equal signs in what we've been working with. An equation is a mathematical statement that two expressions are equal. And second vocab word, solution of an equation, and that's a value that will make the value of a variable that will make the equation true. So we'll start out with just a little explanation of how we're going to go about solving equations. And these rules apply to one step, two step, however many steps you're doing. So in order to find the solution of an equation, we have to isolate the variable. Now isolate means to get the variable by itself. And we want to do that so that the variable is all by itself on one side of the equation. In order to make this happen, we have to use something called inverse operations. Now, inverse operations undo operations on the variable. So, for example, if a variable is being added, I'm going to subtract, because addition and subtraction are inverse operations. Then, also, multiplication and division are inverse operations. So, if a variable is being multiplied by something, to undo that, I'm going to divide. One way to think about it is an equation is like a scale. We always have to keep it balanced. So to do that, we do the same thing to both sides all the time. So if you add 3 to one side, you have to add 3 to the other side. You can never do something to only one side. So whatever you do, do it to both sides. So let's start with equations, how to solve equations using addition. So here's our first example. We have y minus 8 equals 24. So the first thing we want to do is find the variable. Here's our variable y right here. And then we ask the question, what is happening to the variable? That's always going to be the first question that you ask when you're solving equations. What's happening to the variable? Well, in this we have y minus 8. So y is being subtracted by 8. So we have to undo that. So the opposite of minus 8 is plus 8. And you'll see here, negative 8 plus 8 is 0. That's going to cancel out. So all I'll have left is y. Now, again, remember we have the rule that whatever we do to one side, we have to do to the other. So since we added 8 here, we have to add 8 here. So then we do 24 plus 8, and we get 32. Now I have the variable isolated, and I have my answer. And this would be exactly how you would show your work. A lot of people like to say, well, I can just do that in my head, I know the answer. That's great, I'm happy for you, but I still need to see your work. Let's look at a little bit more difficult one now with fractions. So again, the first thing we do is we find our variable. Here's our variable z. And we ask, what's happening to the variable? Well, it's being subtracted by 7/16. So what's the opposite of subtraction? Well, it's addition. So I'm going to add 7/16. And again, whatever I do to one side, I have to do to the other side. So then, over here, negative 7/16 plus 7/16, that's 0. I'm just left with z. And over here, 5/16 plus 7/16, these are fractions. Have to check for a common denominator. I got one, so I just got to do 5 plus 7, which is 12/16. I'm running out of room here. Now, one thing that's important when I have fractions, I want to make sure that it's reduced as much as possible. 12/16 is not reduced, so we got to ask what goes in both 12 and 16. Hopefully you're thinking 4 right now. So 12 divided by 4 is 3. And 16 divided by 4 is 4. So our answer there would be 3/4. And yes, You would get it wrong if you had 12/16. You need to simplify. Now our third example here is one that causes some complications because of the negative sign. So if you look at this equation here, we have -8 plus z equals 20. So again, we ask, what's happening to our variable z? Well, it's being added by -8. Okay? Now, let's think about adding -8. Hopefully you know by now that adding -8 is the same as subtracting 8. Those are the same things. So what I do to kind of help with this problem where it gets confusing, one rule that I follow is always look at the sign in front of the number that you're moving. Okay, so I want to get rid of this -8 because I want z by itself. So -8 is negative, it's got a negative sign in front of it. So to cancel that out, to make it 0, I have to add 8. Now that seems weird because I have this plus sign after it. But just remember that I go with the sign in front of the number that I'm moving. So I have -8 plus 8, that's 0, that cancels, so I just have z left. And then 20 plus 8, that's 28. So then I have my answer. So beware of those where they throw a negative sign in front of the number. Remember to do the opposite of the sign that's in front of your number. Let's look at subtraction now, solving equations using subtraction. These are very similar, so I'll go through these a little bit faster. So again, I find my variable, m. What's being done to m? Well, it's being added by 17. What's the opposite of adding? Well, subtracting. So let's subtract 17. Remember, whatever I do from one side, I have to do to the other. So 17 minus 17, that's 0. 33 minus 17, I'm not sure about that. Let's do a little subtraction here. 13 minus 7 is 6. 2 minus 1 is 1. So I get 16. So my answer to that one would be 16. Here's one with some decimals for us. Again, here's my variable, t. What's being done to t? Well, it's being added by 1.8. So what's the opposite of adding? Subtracting. So 1 minus 1.8. Minus 1.8. Have to do the same thing to both sides all the time. So 1.8 minus 1.8, that's 0. So I got t. 4.2 minus 1.8. I got to do a little borrowing here. 12 minus 8 is 4. Drop the decimal point straight down. 3 minus 1 is 2. So I get 2.4. Okay? Now, of course, as always, and I know you guys are very excited about this, there will always be story problems, our favorite thing. So I thought I'd give you an example of a story problem. You're going to want to write this down because when you have a story problem in your homework tomorrow, you're going to want to look back. So here's our story problem. Over 20 years, the population of a town decreased by 275 people to a population of 850. Write and solve an equation to find the original population. Now I'm going to tell you right now, a lot of these story problems you're going to want to do without writing an equation with a variable. Okay? But we need to practice writing equations with a variable. So, the population is what we're looking for. We're going to call that x. Okay? Population equals x. Okay? The population decreased. Now hopefully you'll remember from chapter 1, decrease, that's a key word, means subtraction. So the population, x, decreased by 275 people. And that equals, okay, by 275 to a population of 850. So here's our equation. We have the original population x minus 275 because it decreased, and it's now 850. So I have to solve that. So what I'm going to do is, again, find my variable. It's x. What's happening to it? Minus 275. What's the opposite of subtraction? Yep, that's what it is. Addition. I heard you all say it. Thank you. So I'm going to add 275 to both sides. So then I'm going to get, let's see, 5, 12, carry my 1, 11, 25, and we're talking population here, so we're talking people. So the original population was 1,125 people. Alright, and that would be how I would show my work for a story problem. I would write an equation and solve it. Okay? So look out for those in your homework tomorrow. As usual, if you have any questions, make sure to make note of them so that you can ask about them tomorrow. And I will see you guys then.